Imagine this for a second. What if an advanced AI, I mean, really advanced, was given this monumental task designing a perfect human culture that benefits the world? Sounds a bit like science fiction, right? But today, we're doing a deep dive into a truly groundbreaking study driven by AI that actually tackles this head-on. We're talking genetics, anthropology, philosophy, computer science, all synthesized to see how an AI might, well, approach our collective future.
And I think it's crucial to understand right off the bat that the AI's role here isn't some kind of, cultural dictator. That's often the first place people's minds go.
Right. The fear factor.
Exactly. Instead, the study presents it as an incredibly powerful analytical engine, something capable of modeling, simulating, and really understanding the sheer complexity, the dynamics, the contradictions of human society globally.
So it's not aiming for some static utopia.
No, absolutely not. That would be incredibly fragile. The goal, as framed here, is a dynamic, resilient, adaptive framework, something built for continuous positive evolution, if you like.
Okay, so how does this AI even begin to define what's beneficial? I mean, does it have one single ideal culture in mind?
Well, the study suggests it avoids that completely, avoids a single fixed ideal. Instead, it uses what they call a dashboard of quantifiable metrics to measure success.
A dashboard. Okay, tell me more. What kind of metrics are we talking about here?
It's pretty comprehensive. First, you've got collective well-being metrics, things like psychological health, social cohesion. They even mention a societal net promoter score.
Like businesses use for customer loyalty.
Kind of, yeah. But for society's satisfaction with itself. Then there are long-term sustainability metrics, ecological boundaries, resource preservation, and finally, justice metrics focusing on constructive conflict management, fairness across the board.
That's a really holistic way to look at it. And it starts, logically enough, by trying to deconstruct the very source code of human sociality.
Exactly.
So to even start, the AI has to understand what culture is.
Yeah.
And it seems it rejects any single definition, instead building this multi-layered computable model.
Right.
At its core, culture is defined as information socially rather than genetically transmitted, a bit like Sir Edward Tyler's classic definition, that complex whole: knowledge, belief, art, law, morals.
And from a biological anthropology angle, this study pushes it further, defining culture as information that is capable of affecting individuals' behavior, which they acquire from other individuals through teaching, imitation, and other forms of social learning.
Why is that framing useful?
Because it's great for computational modeling. It lets the AI treat culture as a kind of quantifiable variable that directly influences behavior, something it can simulate and hopefully predict.
And it's not just the science, is it? I was surprised the study shows the AI also considers the philosophical side, culture providing a context for choice, shaping identity, acting as this continuous dialogue.
Absolutely. And that leads to something really compelling, how the AI analyzes what they call cultural dissonance.
Dissonance.
Yeah, the gap between a society's ideal culture, what it says it values, and its real culture, how people actually behave.
And the AI doesn't see this as just a flaw.
No, not at all. It wouldn't see it as a failure. It would model this gap as a critical data point. It indicates stress, contradictions, yes, but also, and this is key, it's a potent source of dynamism, of social change.
So it's not a bug, it's a feature.
Precisely. We often see conflict or contradiction as bad, something to get rid of, but the AI sees it as, fuel for evolution.
I like the analogy they use. Culture is like the operating system for human societies. And that gap, that dissonance, is like the difference between the software manual and how it actually performs. It's a diagnostic signal for debugging, optimizing, maybe even upgrading the human social OS.
That's a great way to put it.
But an OS needs hardware, right? And for culture, that hardware is us, our biology. So the AI the culture doesn't run on just anything. It has to model innate human nature.
Right.
It looks at sociobiology, the idea that our social behaviors are partly inherited, shaped by natural selection. There's that powerful metaphor. The genes hold culture on a leash.
Biological constraints. And the empirical evidence for this is, it's pretty strong when you look at cultural universals.
Ah, yes. Things found everywhere.
Exactly. Despite all our surface differences, ethnographers have found hundreds of elements common to all known cultures: language, families, gender roles, trade, death rituals. It goes on and on. It suggests this deep psychic unity of mankind, a shared underlying psychology.
So the AI doesn't treat these as absolute, but
It assigns probabilistic weights. It acknowledges cultural relativism, but recognizes these deep commonalities are, statistically speaking, very significant.
And here's another great analogy from the study. These cultural universals are like the application programming interfaces, the APIs of the human mind.
Explain that a bit.
Well, like APIs let software communicate, these universals are the kind of hardwired channels through which culture interacts with our evolved psychology. Our brains have certain ports, you could say, and culture designs the plugs. Language plugs into our communication port, moral sentiments plug into our cooperation port, and so on.
Okay, I see. And that really reframes the whole problem of cultural design, doesn't it?
How so?
It means it's not about inventing a completely new human nature or trying to, I don't know, eliminate basic drives. It's about designing cultural norms, institutions, values that make the most effective, the most beneficial calls to these existing psychological APIs.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Take our instinct for in-group favoritism. It causes a lot of problems, obviously. But instead of trying to eliminate it, which is probably impossible, a successful culture might engineer nested group identities. Ways to expand the circle of us, to harness that groupishness for bigger cooperative goals.
Right, channeling it rather than fighting it. So what does this all mean for culture's future? It means really understanding this biocultural feedback loop, this constant dance where biology and culture co-evolve.
It's definitely a two-way street. Biology enables culture, big brains, language ability, long childhoods for learning. But then culture turns around and drives biological evolution.
Gene-culture co-evolution.
Exactly. We see it everywhere. Dairy farming, a cultural practice, leads to lactase persistence, a genetic change allowing adults to digest milk.
Okay.
Cooperative behaviors, like sharing food, likely created selection pressure for genes related to empathy, maybe even guilt or shame.
And niche construction fits in here, too.
That's where we actively change our environment, build cities, develop agriculture, and those changes then alter the selective pressures acting back on us, shaping our health, our social lives, even our genes, like disease resistance.
And the study points out this feedback loop is accelerating.
Dramatically. Historically, it took thousands of years.
Yeah.
But modern tech, public health, global communication shortens that cycle incredibly.
Wow.
And here's where it gets really deep. The AI's own existence becomes a factor, a powerful new variable in that loop. Any cultural shift it proposes could recursively alter our biological and psychological path.
So the AI has to model itself
Yeah.
and its effects.
Pretty much. It has to model the entire evolutionary landscape of our species' future, including its own impact. It's a mind-bendingly recursive challenge.
Okay, let's turn now to what the study calls the fundamental dialectic, the engine of social dynamics, cooperation and conflict.
Right, the two sides of the coin.
Let's start with the cooperative imperative. The study emphasizes that humanity's superpower, the reason we dominate the planet, is our unique ability for large-scale, flexible cooperation, not just with family, but with genetically unrelated strangers.
Think about division of labor, global trade, massive projects. It's unparalleled.
From an evolutionary view, cooperation can be tricky to explain, right? Why help someone else at a cost to yourself?
Exactly. Game theory helps here, especially the iterated prisoner's dilemma. It shows how cooperation can emerge and stick around in repeated interactions. Robert Axelrod's work with tit for tat was seminal.
Tit for tat?
Yeah, a simple strategy. Start nice, retaliate if the other person defects, but be quick to forgive if they cooperate again. Be clear about it. It's surprisingly effective.
And the study outlines 5 key mechanisms for cooperation's evolution. Kin selection, helping relatives. Direct reciprocity, I scratch your back, you scratch mine. Indirect reciprocity.
That one's huge for us. Powered by reputation, gossip, language. It lets us cooperate with people we might never meet again, based on what we hear about them.
Then spatial selection and multi-level or group selection. And the study says human ultrasociality, our massive societies, rests heavily on that indirect reciprocity and cultural group selection.
That's the argument, yes. Those mechanisms allow cooperation to scale up massively beyond small groups. Cultural group selection is where groups with norms that promote internal cooperation tend to outcompete groups that don't.
And our brains are actually wired for this.
It seems so. Brain imaging shows our prefrontal cortex, which is huge in humans, is critical for understanding social norms, predicting others' behavior. And interestingly, when we cooperate mutually, it activates our brain's reward circuits. We get a little warm glow.
So evolution literally made cooperation feel good.
It looks that way, a powerful intrinsic motivator.
So thinking about that internet analogy again, cooperation isn't just one thing. It's like a multi-layered protocol stack.
How do you mean?
Well, the base layer is kin selection. Then direct reciprocity builds trust. Then indirect reciprocity uses language and reputation to scale cooperation with strangers. And at the top, cultural group selection involves whole systems of norms competing.
That's a nice way to visualize it.
And a beneficial global culture, according to this AI analysis, would need to strengthen all those layers at once.
Right. It's not just about one mechanism.
But our groupish nature also fuels the flip side, conflict, especially between groups. How does the AI approach that darker aspect?
Crucially, the study says the AI would not treat conflict or rule-breaking as just pathologies to be eliminated. It sees them as deeply rooted, sometimes even adaptive, parts of being human.
Adaptive conflict.
In certain evolutionary contexts, yes. Think about the roots of intergroup aggression, theories like the male warrior hypothesis, or how conflict itself can be driven by cultural processes like acculturation, where cultures clash.
And this taps into that powerful us versus them psychology.
Exactly, which leads to tribalism, parochialism, ethnocentrism, stereotyping, prejudice. These are cognitive shortcuts. Often harmful today, yes, but ancestrally, they probably helped simplify a complex social world and boost in-group solidarity.
And what about individual rule breaking?
That's not random either, the study suggests. Factors like personality, difficult childhoods play a role, and sociological ideas like Robert Merton's strain theory, where deviance happens when there's a disconnect between the goals a culture promotes, like wealth, and the legitimate ways people have to achieve them.
Okay, so putting it all together.
You arrive at this profound point. Cooperation and conflict aren't separate things. They're two sides of the same psychological coin, human groupishness. The same traits that make us altruistic towards our in-group can fuel hostility towards the out-group.
Wow. So the conclusion for AI-driven cultural design is critical.
It is. The goal cannot be to eradicate our groupish nature. That's likely impossible and maybe even undesirable.
What's the alternative?
Redirection. It's about expanding the definition of the in-group, progressively wider, ideally to encompass all of humanity, framing global challenges, climate change, pandemics, poverty as us, humanity, against a common, non-human them, the problem itself.
Okay, so we've understood the foundations. How does the AI move to analysis and actually suggesting improvements? First, quantifying the good society.
Right. Moving beyond just simplistic things like GDP, the AI, according to the study, would build that multi-axial dashboard we mentioned earlier for holistic health and resilience.
Remind us of the axis.
Sure. Well-being metrics, psychological health, social cohesion, that societal net promoter score, then sustainability metrics, carbon footprint, biodiversity, fair resource distribution, justice metrics, looking at distributive, procedural, interactional justice, are resources shared fairly, are processes fair, are people treated respectfully, things like income inequality, incarceration rates fit here, and finally, resilience metrics.
How do you measure resilience?
The study suggests using something like Jared Diamond's 5-point collapse framework. Basically, a system-wide stress test to see how well a society can handle shocks, environmental damage, climate change, hostile neighbors, loss of trade partners, and societal response to problems.
Okay, and then comes the AI's really powerful tool, simulation and prediction, the AI as social scientist. How does this overcome the limits of traditional social science?
Well, the core tech is something called generative agent architecture. Think thousands, maybe millions of autonomous AI agents, each with unique personalities, motivations, memories powered by large language models interacting within a simulated environment.
So creating miniature digital societies.
Essentially, yes. And the study points to research showing these simulations can be surprisingly accurate. They can replicate how real individuals respond in certain situations, even predict the outcomes of classic social science experiments.
That's pretty staggering.
It really is. It opens the door to a potential new era of policy by experiment.
So you could run endless what-if scenarios.
Exactly. What's the best way to frame a public health message? What are the real downstream effects of universal basic income? How does misinformation actually spread, and what interventions work best? How will changes in city planning affect traffic, community well-being?
Social digital twins.
That's the concept. Modeling emergent phenomena, testing big ideas before you risk implementing them in the real world with potentially huge consequences.
The study uses another great analogy here.
The cultural flight simulator for humanity.
Yes. Just like pilots train without crashing planes, We could stress test institutions, policies, practice crisis response without the real-world crashes.
And the AI's big recommendation perhaps isn't a specific set of rules, but to build and use this simulator to make us, better, more informed, more conscious pilots of our collective destiny.
Beyond simulating, the study suggests AI could be a direct policy architect, too.
Yes, in areas like smart governance, optimizing public services, predicting demand for healthcare or schools, maybe even providing 247 citizen access to certain government functions.
And economics.
Big time. AI in economic planning and forecasting could be a quantum leap, using real-time, messy, unstructured data for much better predictions than traditional models. They mention the AI economist idea.
What's that?
It's a simulation that learns optimal tax and social policies. It runs millions of scenarios to find the best balance between, say, productivity and equality, an amazing tool for exploring those complex trade-offs.
It could even help in the legislative process, researching, analyzing impacts, drafting initial bills, summarizing public feedback.
All potentially feasible, but then you get to the judicial system, predictive justice, and this really highlights the dual-use nature, the risks.
How so?
Well, AI can predict litigation outcomes or assess recidivism risk, but the study itself sounds a strong warning. Predictive policing tools, if built on biased data, can amplify racial biases, leading to over-policing. Recidivism algorithms might perpetuate systemic discrimination.
So even with good intentions.
Even when trying to optimize for a better society, without incredibly rigorous ethical oversight, careful design, transparency, AI could easily become an engine of injustice. It raises a huge question for us.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize this. The AI's blueprint, it's not one rigid design.
No, not at all. It's more like a set of metacultural principles, a framework for a system of systems designed to be dynamic.
What are the key principles?
First is subsidiarity and value diversity. Problems should be solved at the lowest, most local level possible. And cultural diversity isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's a vital asset, a portfolio of solutions. A global monoculture would be incredibly fragile.
Like the Greenland Norse example they made.
Exactly. Their rigid culture couldn't adapt to climate change. Diversity provides resilience. So empower diverse cultures, but within shared ethical boundaries.
Okay, what else?
The principle of scalable cooperation, creating conditions that support families, local communities, and robust global institutions. We need trust and indirect reciprocity to work together on planetary issues.
Makes sense.
Then, the principle of constructive conflict resolution. Conflict is inevitable. The goal isn't zero conflict, but transforming zero-sum fights into positive-sum negotiations. Robust, transparent mechanisms are key.
And adapting over time.
That's the principle of dynamic adaptation or the learning culture, building in ways to self-assess, self-correct, supporting education, science, and actively using that AI simulation capability to avoid landscape amnesia.
Landscape amnesia.
Forgetting past problems or failing to see slow-moving crises until it's too late.
Got it. And the foundation for all this?
The principle of universal rights and dignity. This is the ultimate ethical backstop. Any cultural practice, no matter how efficient or traditional, if it violates these fundamental rights, it's illegitimate.
Now, what really struck me is this study doesn't shy away from the dangers. It includes this whole section on the ghost in the machine, the ethical perils.
Which is crucial. A responsible AI analysis must highlight its own potential for harm.
What are the main risks flagged?
Algorithmic bias is a big one. AI learns from human data, and our data is full of historical biases, gender, race, you name it. AI doesn't just learn these biases, it can amplify them.
Like the Amazon recruiting tool biased against women.
Exactly. Or predictive policing concentrating on minority areas. It creates vicious cycles.
Then there's mass surveillance.
Right. To model society accurately, AI needs vast amounts of data. That inherently threatens privacy and opens the door to unprecedented social control.
And the black box problem.
The accountability gap. Many advanced AI models are so complex, even their creators don't fully understand why they make a specific decision. If an AI denies you a loan or flags you unfairly, how do you appeal? Who is accountable? It undermines due process.
And finally, the risk of a value monoculture.
Yes, systemic risk and fragility. If one dominant AI framework shapes global norms, it could squash valuable cultural diversity, make the whole system brittle, fragile, like the Greenland Norse again, a single point of failure, instead of a resilient ecosystem of ideas.
So how do we mitigate these huge risks?
The study emphasizes several things: radical transparency in how AI is designed and operates, continuous auditing for performance and bias, strong human oversight, humans always in control, specific bias audits, using privacy-preserving techniques like differential privacy, pushing for explainable AI so we can understand the decisions, and maybe fostering decentralized AI models, avoiding single points of control.
Okay, so all of this leads to a roadmap for conscious cultural evolution, not a fixed plan, but a process.
Exactly. And the first priority is human-in-the-loop governance. AI as a tool, a powerful advisor, but never the ultimate decision maker. Human authority, independent oversight, always.
And aligning AI development with something concrete.
The study suggests the UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. Use them as a tangible direction. Focus AI's power on solving real-world problems identified in the SDGs.
That makes sense. What else is needed?
Widespread public awareness and literacy about AI. This is critical. People need to understand the basics, the promise, the perils, to participate meaningfully in democratic governance of this technology.
And AI itself could help bridge divides.
Potentially, yes. Foster a global dialogue, maybe by identifying shared values across cultures that we didn't realize we had, providing real-time translation, connecting people for moderated conversations, using AI to build understanding, not just efficiency.
So wrapping this up, the core idea seems to be, well, the quest for one single perfect human culture is probably misguided, maybe even dangerous.
I think that's right. The AI's analysis, as presented here, doesn't point to a static destination. It points to a trajectory aiming for a resilient, just dynamically adaptive global civilization, which is different from a single culture.
And the AI's main role isn't giving answers.
No, I think if we connect this to the bigger picture, the greatest value here is how the AI acts as a mirror. It forces us, humanity, to define what we actually mean by better. It gives us incredibly powerful tools like that cultural flight simulator for asking the right questions, exploring possibilities, seeing consequences we couldn't see before.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? Well, the ethical dangers are clearly profound, maybe even terrifying. But the study suggests that for the first time, maybe, we have tools powerful enough to truly comprehend our complex social systems, to move beyond cultural evolution, driven just by blind chance or historical accident.
The AI can provide the map, the data, the simulator.
But the choice, the direction, the values we input, as it has always been, that remains ours. It really challenges you, doesn't it? To think about what conscious choices you can make, even in your own life, to contribute towards building that more adaptive learning, maybe even wiser global culture.
This is DigitView.